Hey, welcome to Lecture 3. Today we're talking about body paragraphs and conclusions. So some really important information in this lecture. All right, so first let's start talking about body paragraphs. This is any paragraph that's after your introduction and before your conclusion, body paragraph. And the purpose of body paragraphs is to develop one key subpoint or topic that supports your thesis in some way, right? Now, the entire paragraph should be tightly focused around that one key topic or subpoint, all right? This is one of those big organizational things that I will be looking at when I grade your papers. How are your paragraphs structured, and are they tightly focused around that one key point? Another purpose of the body paragraphs is obviously to present and synthesize your research. So you should have some form of primary or secondary research quoted or referenced in every body paragraph. This is a pretty universal rule, and I can't think of very many exceptions for it. If I see an entire body paragraph that doesn't have a single reference in it, that's a bit of a red flag for me. It means that that paragraph's not doing what it needs to be doing, or you're plagiarizing, or something is not working, right? Every paragraph should be supported by some form of research that you have referenced, okay? So let's talk about the structure for body paragraphs. Now, this is my own personal preference, just letting you know, but this is a formula that I recommend for really strong body paragraphs, okay? So first thing I recommend, the single most important thing, if nothing else, this absolutely should be in place, and that is a solid topic sentence to your paragraph, all right? A topic sentence that announces the topic, the point, the argument of the paragraph, all right? Now, I highly recommend that it's a transition topic sentence if possible, and I'm going to talk about transition topic sentences in just a minute, sort of explain what I mean by that. But another thing that I recommend about this topic sentence, it should always be in your own words, right? I discourage quoting sources or quoting anything in your topic sentence. Try to say the point of your paragraph in your own words and then introduce your sources that are developing that point. I feel like that just makes for better flow and for stronger paragraphs because you are showing that you know the point of your paragraph and can say it in your own words. So after your really good topic sentence, then introduce the evidence, the quotes, whatever it is from your research, primary or secondary research, that is supporting that point, that is developing that point. And then after you introduce your quotes, make sure that you explain them. Make sure they are all thoroughly explained to show how they support the main argument. We're going to come back and talk about that quite a bit. I can't remember if it's this lecture or the next one, actually, but we're going to talk about how to do that. Then after you introduce evidence, then you have time, space for any further analysis or claims or however you're going to develop your point in your own words if you want to do that. And then finally, in the very last place, I recommend having a good, solid, what I refer to as a conclusion sentence. And this is a sentence that just, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at the end. 2, 3, and 4, you can maybe mix around if you need to, but at least by the end of your paragraph, you should have some sort of sentence that directly links your point back to your thesis statement. Makes it very clear and explicit how this paragraph, how this point, how whatever it is you're talking about relates to your overall argument. Okay, that is a formula that I recommend for really strong body paragraphs. So let's talk about the transition topic sentence, okay? the best way to create flow in a paper is to have really solid transitions between your paragraphs. Now, some of you in high school or in other places may have been taught to put transitions at the end of a paragraph. And again, this is maybe my personal preference, but in my professional opinion, I think it's very difficult to do good transitions at the end of a paragraph because I think when you put a transition at the end of a paragraph, it feels too much like a topic switch and it makes your paragraph feel unfocused. I had a writing teacher in college teach me about the transition topic sentence, and I feel like that is a much stronger way to make transitions. So, what is the transition topic sentence? Well, hopefully it's obvious. It's a topic sentence that has the transition as part of it. So, it can be two clauses, right? And one of the clauses, usually the first one, it doesn't have to be, but one of the clauses takes your point or a piece of information from your previous paragraph, mentions it, and then connects it to the second clause, which is where you introduce the new topic for your paragraph. I will have some examples of this in a second, but that's how you do it. You grab a piece of information from the previous paragraph, you bring it up in that topic sentence to show how it connects and flows into, and here's your new topic that you've now introduced, all right? Now, transitions are going to use transitional phrases, right? So that's going to be phrases like, in addition, in contrast, another example of this. However, we might, like those are sort of transitional phrases. Those are phrases that are connecting information. They make connections. This is so crucial for flow in your paper, all right? Showing how everything relates or connects. And doing your transition in a transition topic sentence makes you think really carefully about the organization of your paragraphs. Why are you putting this paragraph after this paragraph, right? What's the connection between them, and can you make that connection? Okay. All right, so here's some example transition topic sentences. Let's take a look at this first one. Not only are bilinguals beneficial in the sense that they are able to connect with a larger variety of customers on a deeper level, but multilinguals also have advantages that are a lot more scientific. Okay, so you'll see this is maybe a longer sentence, but you see the two clauses there, right? And that first clause is referring to the topic of the previous paragraph, where this student talked about how multilinguals are beneficial because they can connect to a variety of customers, right? That was the topic of the previous paragraph. And found a way to connect it into the introduction of the new paragraph topic, which is how multilinguals have advantages that are more scientific. Not a very specific topic sentence, but better than none, right? It's a really, really good attempt. Just want to let you know I pulled these examples from actual student papers, and I will say this, I may have edited them a little bit to make them slightly stronger than they were in the original papers, but that's an example for you of what a transition topic sentence can look like. So here's a second one down below. Another reason why employers are more inclined to hire multilingual employees over monolingual employees is because often in the workplace, you need people that are coachable and can learn and adapt as quickly as possible. Okay, so this one works a little bit differently because the reference to previous information is slightly more vague. However, we still have that very clear transitional phrase of another reason, okay? Another reason why employers want to do this. So we've been talking about reasons why employers want to hire multilinguals, and here's another reason. It's a good transitional phrase, and then it also introduces the new topic. It's because you need people that are coachable and can learn and adapt as quickly as possible. That's what this paragraph is going to be about. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so you do see how that works as a pretty solid transition topic sentence as well. Okay, so here are questions to ask when you're composing or revising your body paragraphs. I want you to be thinking about these things in both places. Now, if you're the architect type of writer where you need to have things structured beforehand, topic sentences are going to be key for you to start on. Start with your topic sentence. Know what your topic is for your paragraph. You can do that in the outlining, and then go through all of these questions even maybe before you write the paragraph. to figure out how you're going to structure it. For my Gardner writers, which is me, just write what you need to write, and then in the revision process, this is what I do always when I'm revising my body paragraphs. I will go back through and I will look at each paragraph and I will be like, okay, what is the point of this paragraph? Have I figured it out? Because for me, I write it, and usually by the end of the paragraph is where I figure out where my point is. So I will identify the point wherever I found it, and then I will make sure to revise my topic sentence so that it indicates what that point is, all right? So here are the questions to ask you when I either side of that process. 1, does my first sentence introduce the topic of this paragraph in my own words, right? You're not quoting anyone else. You are just clearly stating the new topic of your paragraph. It means you've identified the new topic of your paragraph. Does my first sentence offer a transitional phrase or a tie back to the previous paragraph? Okay, and I will point out here that does not have to apply to the first body paragraph after the introduction, because that first body paragraph right after your thesis statement, you don't need to have a transition there, all right? You also don't need to necessarily have a transitional phrase when you start your conclusion, all right? But the body paragraphs in between, in the middle of all of that, should have transitions. Do I offer quotes or research evidence to support my point or topic? Okay, every paragraph should have quotes, something from your research, some form of evidence. And is all offered evidence fully explained? You can't just drop a quote into the middle of your paragraph and just leave it there and not say anything about it, all right? You have to explain your quote. You have to explain your research and really explain how it supports your thesis statement, how it connects in some way, all right? We are talking more about that later. Does everything in the paragraph relate to the topic or point? Is this paragraph tightly focused, okay? Now, this is a problem, especially, I feel like, for Gardner writers, where you're writing and ideas come up and things are just, you're like, oh yeah, I need to talk about that and I need to talk about that. And when you go back through and revise, make sure, wait, by the end of your paragraph, are you still talking about that topic that you indicated in your topic sentence, or have you sort of switched? Do you need to start a new paragraph? Do you need to rearrange this information? Or do you need to figure out what your new point is? But tight paragraphs, good, strong paragraphs are going to just develop one central point really well, okay? And then finally, do I have a conclusion sentence that ties everything back to the thesis? And remember, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the last place, but somewhere in your paragraph, you should have some sort of phrase that makes it really clear how this point is supporting your thesis. Even if you think it's obvious, this is the same thing for explaining quotes. Even if you think it's obvious what the point is, even if you think it's obvious how this is supporting the thesis statement, say it anyway, all right? Make it super clear. It's not even just for your reader, it's for me to know that you know, all right? Make it clear that you understand. All right, let's move on to talking briefly about the conclusion of your paper. I will be the first to say that I think conclusions are hard. I think they're hard to write. I never know. I never know how to conclude my papers. So let's just talk about some things, some do's and don'ts, some things to consider. So usually a conclusion is just one paragraph long, okay? Like your introduction. And I would suggest that you avoid beginning your conclusions with the phrase "in conclusion." Once again, that's not something you're going to lose points over. It's just one of those cliches that is best to avoid if you can, all right, to make your writing feel just a little bit stronger. However, it is a good transition and it is a good indication that you're leading into the conclusion. Like I said, up to you. Just a suggestion. All right, so something for to do in your conclusion, you summarize the points that you've already made in your paper. What's key is you don't want to be introducing new points in your conclusion. That's not good, all right? Don't introduce new points or new arguments, okay? You're just summarizing ones that you've already made. What you can do, though, is to make any necessary connections between your points, right? If you haven't had space or time in your body paragraphs to maybe make all the connections you wanted to, the conclusion is a good thing to do in your conclusion, is to sort of, even if you have made all the connections you want, re-say those connections. This is your final chance for synthesis, for showing here's one side, here's the other side, here's how I'm combining this, here's my arguments, here's how we're all tying everything together, fitting it all together. Make all of those connections really clear. Okay, and here's the thing. Even if you feel like you've already done it well, a conclusion is a place for you to say it again. And that's one of the ways I think conclusions are hard, is that sometimes it feels like you're being redundant. Like you've already said this stuff, you've already made your points. And it's hard. It's hard to write a conclusion that doesn't feel repetitive or redundant. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge. You've said your stuff. Now in your conclusion, you kind of say it all again really succinctly in a non-repetitive way. Consider tying back to your introduction. This is not something you have to do, but if you had some sort of really fun way that you started out your paper with a fun quote or with a story or with something really engaging or bringing up that provocative question, go ahead and refer all the way back to it. It's just a nice way of, like rounding things out, completing everything, tying up all your loose ends, something to consider doing. Emphasize the significance of your argument, all right? That's a really key thing to do in a conclusion, is to be like, this is important. This is I'm saying something really important here, and this is why it's important. That's a great thing to do in your conclusion. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is to restate your thesis, right? In the process of saying how significant your argument is, just remind your reader, this is the big argument, and can you see how I've made it? Now, again, going back to the idea of not being super repetitive, you don't necessarily want to restate it word for word. However, if that's the best option you have, go ahead. That's the challenge of the conclusion. Re-say everything you've already said without being repetitive, and in a way that ties it all together and makes everything just feel finished and complete for your reader. Okay, so here's a student example of a conclusion paragraph, and I am going to go ahead and read through it out loud. And just listen for all of those parts, for how they're sort of summarizing arguments, making connections between all of their subpoints, and then like restating the thesis and how it's significant. What we can learn from both the studies of experts and my personal experience actually being a bilingual employee is that despite the common idea that non-native English speakers may find it harder to find a job here in the United States due to their lack of experience with the English language, the reality is that companies and organizations benefit greatly from multilingual employees due to their ability to interact and collaborate more efficiently with a larger array of people and their more advanced cognitive and problem-solving skills that help them learn new information and skills quicker. This is important to understand. See, now they're highlighting the significance of this. Because now you have the knowledge necessary to be more competitive in your job market, or better understand how to select the right and more efficient team members to build your own organization or business. In the diverse and fast-changing world that we live in today, multilinguals are key members of any sort of organization or company. That's their thesis statement restated. One thing I will say, this is not a perfect conclusion. I highly, highly discourage using personal pronouns like you or your, directly addressing the audience that way. You can get away with using personal pronouns. We talked about that. You can get away with using personal pronouns. Don't ever use secondary pronouns. Ever, ever, ever. You, your, don't address your reader that way. That is not an appropriate tone for a formal research paper. So where they did that is not the greatest. But other things that they did are good. They presented the counter arguments. They presented their claims, that their subpoints that they developed in their paper. To combat those counter arguments, they talked about why their argument was significant. They ended with that restatement of their thesis statement without actually restating it. So they did some good things here. All right, that is everything about body paragraphs and conclusions. One more lecture to go.